Hello and welcome to It's a Code You, mental health support for those working in healthcare. This is a podcast created for healthcare employees to explore not only issues relating to mental and emotional health, but also unique challenges that those working in healthcare are faced with. Your hosts are Adina Tucker, a licensed clinical social worker with Dartmouth Health, and Jennifer Hinsey, an MSW also with Dartmouth Health. Are you in a relationship with someone you really love, but it feels like the two of you can't communicate? Do you feel like you dread having to talk about an issue with your partner? Welcome to It's a Code You. Today, we're going to take a look at some basic communication skills and how the way we communicate can affect your relationship. And Jennifer and I will role play a discussion using both unhealthy and healthy communication. That should be fun. So let's get started by looking at what the Gottman Institute calls the four horsemen that affect and can ruin relationships. For context, the Gottman Institute was started by Doctors John and Julie Gottman, both psychologists who have done extensive research on couples, their communication, and how they can be happy and successful together. Their method works to disarm conflicting verbal communication and increase intimacy, respect, and affection, as well as remove barriers and create more empathy in the relationship. So, the Gottman Institute talks about the four horsemen, which are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And criticism is, of course, any sort of verbal attack on personality or character of your partner. And if you find that you're often criticizing when trying to express yourself, try using what Gottman calls a gentle startup, which is talking about your feelings using I statements and expressing a positive need. So instead of, I need you to stop being such a jerk, maybe you'd say, I would like it if you could be more mindful of my feelings when you are expressing yourself. Contempt is the next of the four horsemen. Contempt is when there's a negative feeling about someone, usually accompanied by a sense of being better than that person or even judging them. And it can often come with anger or disgust. And a way to combat and ward off contempt is to do what the Gottmans call build a culture of appreciation. And when you're doing this, you're really reminding yourself of your partner's positive qualities and you practice gratitude for the positive things about them. An example of what the difference might be in a conversation is let's say you work late 2 nights a week. And when you do, your partner consistently does not clean up the kitchen after making dinner. If you were approaching them with contempt, you might say something like, you never help out when I need it. You're so selfish. But if you were to use the antidote for that, you might say, I know you're busy a lot, but it would really be helpful if the nights when I work late, you could clean the kitchen after you make dinner. I would really appreciate the support.
Those are great examples. Now let's talk about the next of the four horsemen, which is defensiveness. Defensiveness is when someone perceives that they are being attacked, so they, in a sense, victimize themselves and then reverse the blame. Defensiveness is one of those things that can be really toxic to a relationship. It prevents us from hearing the feelings of our partners, and instead, we're only focusing on ourselves. It can also kill connection between two people. The way to combat being defensive is to hear the perspective of your partner and accept responsibility for your actions. One analogy that I've seen recently is to imagine when your partner is sharing their feelings about something that you have done, that they are tossing you a ball, and your only job is to talk about the ball, not your feelings about the ball or what you feel the other person throwing the ball did, just the ball. The last of the four horsemen is stonewalling. Stonewalling is when someone withdraws because they want to avoid conflict and they communicate their disapproval or distance. This can happen when someone is feeling emotionally overwhelmed. In their research, when couples were in a discussion that centered around conflict, they staged a reason to ask them to hold off the discussion for 30 minutes to fix something and then ask the couples to resume. They found over and over that the couples were much calmer and able to resolve their conflict in a healthier way after having a break. The way to help with the desire to stonewall is to practice self-soothing. So instead of leaving a conversation, communicate that you're feeling overwhelmed and you'd like 20 minutes. and then go and do something completely different for those 20 minutes, maybe read a book or something unrelated. You want to take at least 20 minutes because that's how long it will take before physiologically you can calm down. Then, when you return to the conversation, you'll be much calmer and able to discuss things without feeling so overwhelmed.
Those are all very helpful and they make sense to me. So, now that we've covered the four horsemen of relationships, let's look at tips to help you improve the communication in your relationships. The first one I'll start with is to start looking at issues as a team approach. So, take away blame as this is your fault or my fault, but we have an issue and we're going to solve it together. The next tip is to make room for both viewpoints, especially when they're conflicting. So I know I often say both of these things can be true when talking about things in relationship because each person has their own likes, dislikes, and feelings. And so, for instance, what I find to be disrespectful or intolerable, you might not have any issue with. So it doesn't mean that one of us is wrong. It just means we have to figure out how to make room for both of our experiences and see how that might or might not fit together. The next tip is something that I also talk about in therapy with my clients, and that's to focus on what you can control. You cannot control another person. And sometimes we think, well, if my partner would just do this thing, then everything would be great. And maybe that's true. But the other truth is that you want to be with someone who can be authentically themselves and you still make sense together with you being your authentic self and them being their authentic self. So the trick is to focus on what we can control, even down to the words we choose when we communicate and the tone that we use, how we even behave when we're in conflict. Those are all things that we actually have control over. Another tip is to avoid conflict that isn't necessary. So I like to say that if I notice a tone or that someone seems upset, I'll just ask, is everything okay? There's something going on. If they say, yeah, I'm fine, then I just don't worry about it because when you start to make assumptions, you start trying to manage the emotions of other people. And if someone is upset with you, it is their job to come to you and express that and have a discussion. It's not your job to manage others and be constantly monitoring emotions and all of that. That can make you incredibly anxious and uncomfortable to be in a spot where you're doing that. So you don't need to drag it out of them. So just avoiding making assumptions, simply ask a question and then put it on them to let you know how they're feeling. And then treat your partner the way you would like to be treated. So think about the tone you use when you're speaking and the words that you use to express yourself. And I know that's something I have to work on because I don't usually have a filter around the people in my life. I just say it how it comes out. And I don't necessarily mean anything by it, but then I have to think, well, how is that probably on the receiving end?
Yeah, that's a great point, right? Because with the folks that are closest to us, we might even become a little complacent around how we are expressing ourselves to them, or even take for granted that their presence is there. And we all do this, but that's actually probably a little key that we should be even more mindful to those folks, how we're coming across. It's easy to get comfortable,
Yeah.
right? I do that too. Another tip is to remember that your actions are just as impactful as your words. If you apologize for a behavior, but yet you continue to do it, then your apology doesn't mean very much. Also, if you need to discuss something with your partner, ask if it's a good time. Often we forget that when we are in a relationship with others, we may have something very serious that we want to discuss, and they may have their own things going on. Or maybe they have had a really stressful day and it's just not a good time. So, considering the way you approach having conversations can really help with the way that it's received. And try to avoid sarcasm. It can make it seem like you're being defensive. It might seem like you're belittling or attacking the person. And it really can come off as contempt. I know what we talked about earlier, too. Don't go with the guise of, he should know XYZ. Or if this person really knew me or cared about me, then they'd know I was upset. They'd know why I was upset. It's your responsibility to communicate your wants, your needs, your desires, and to do so clearly. Being in a relationship with someone shouldn't be a guessing game, nor should we expect others to be mind readers. If your partner shares something with you, ask what they need. Clarify, are they wanting to be heard? Do they want you to help them with a problem? Help solve it? Or do they just need a hug? Sometimes stating that you hear the way they are feeling and asking how you can best support them can go a really long way. And also be okay with being wrong. You aren't perfect. No one is. As long as you're willing to see how your actions affect those around you and you're willing to take responsibility, the other person will likely feel much more connected to you than if you were perfect.
Those are all really great. And another tip is to just slow down. And this goes back to the antidote with the four horsemen for stonewalling. There's not a race to solve things. So take a deep breath. Give yourself a minute to calm down before you approach or respond. Listen, don't talk over the other person. Let them say what they need to say and then respond in a way that shows you were listening to them, but also that you heard them. You heard what they're feeling, you heard their experience. Be curious in your conversations. Ask questions that encourage your partner to open up, such as open ended questions instead of a yes or no question. And acknowledge their feelings. Reflect back what you heard them say to make sure you understand their perspective and their feelings. And that also gives them a chance to say, no, that's not right. You don't get it. That way that kind of helps with misunderstandings. And try to find something you agree on, any common ground that can bridge the gap. Give your full attention when your partner is talking. Put your phone down, turn off the TV, make eye contact, and be fully engaged.
Yes, I love that. I love that. Putting the phone down and just being present goes a long way. And make sure you're taking care of your own needs. When your partner says no to a request, don't try to demand or force them into a yes. If it's something that's a deal breaker for you, you can go back to the tip of you can only control yourself, your actions, and your choices. Be tactful in the way that you say things. Use the think test. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it necessary? And kind. Apply those to what you're about to say.
I think these are some good tips to get started with better communication and just better foundation overall. And if you still feel that you're stuck, I would recommend maybe seeing a couples counselor. And it doesn't always have to mean that your relationship is doomed or this is a last ditch effort because we can't get it together. Sometimes it's just difficult to see where you get tripped up when communicating, and having a third party being able to witness it and guide you and give you some tips can be helpful. And I think it's also important to point out that we all have different baggage and backgrounds and grew up in different environments and learned different things. And so then taking those two very different things and putting them together, and oftentimes people don't talk about how they like to communicate. It would be super cool if there was like a manual on like when you get into a relationship, you should have a meeting and you should discuss these are all of the
Mm,
things that are boundaries to me. This is how I like to communicate. This is what happens when I get overwhelmed. This is what I need. That would be super awesome if that was a thing, but it's not. So okay. Well, I hope that you've heard something that was helpful today. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so. If you like what you're hearing, please leave us a rating and review on your favorite listening platform.
mhm.
If you have any questions, concerns, comments, or feedback, or if there's a topic you would like us to cover, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at dhbhs.media@hitchcock.org. And thank you for listening.